finding that healthy self-relationship does not mean that you're going to go through total comfort. You might have to live through something that's uncomfortable to really get to that place of having a really good, healthy relationship with yourself.
Welcome to Rebel CEO, the podcast where we ditch the rules and build businesses that don't just make money, but set your soul on fire. I'm Brianna Kay, your business coach, freedom advocate, and personal permission slip to dream bigger. I scaled my own business to 6 figures while breaking every mold that people told me to fit into, and now I'm here to help you do the same. I'll help you build a business and a life that's so deeply rooted in your purpose that you never feel like you missed out on the life that you are supposed to live. This is your time to root down, rise up, rebel, and manifest all of your wild goals. So grab your coffee, get cozy, and let's dive in. Hey Rebels, welcome to today's episode. We are going to dive deep into what it means to build a business and a life that is fully aligned with who you are at your core. Today my guest is Becca Stackhouse-Mo, and she's the founder of Stacked Intent and a certified family life educator. Becca has made it her mission to help people build a stronger relationship with themselves because, let's be real, if you are not anchored in who you are, everything else can start to feel off balance. And the scary thing is, you don't even realize it a lot of the time until you do finally find that alignment with yourself, and then you look back and realize how lost you were before. So in this episode, we are exploring how your relationship with yourself directly impacts your personal growth, your business, and how you show up in the world. Plus, we will talk about 9 key traits that can help you cultivate a positive self-image starting today. So let's get right into it. Okay, so I'm super excited to hear from you and to hear your insight on all of this. I was looking over the notes and I'm like, okay, I'm not sure which 9 traits you're going to give us, but I'm ready for it. So, Becca, thank you for being on the call. I would love to actually just start by hearing a little bit about who you are as a human and then your story of how you got to where you're at now in business.
Okay, so my story as a human, I don't know. I guess we can start with as I've always loved to be who I am, like just show up as I am. I don't like to change when I'm around other people. And so that's kind of how I've been all my life. And that makes you friends sometimes and it doesn't make you friends sometimes. It's just kind of how that rolls. But it's helped me along the way to be able to always identify what Becca needs and then be able to communicate that and vocalize it. So I am a wife, and then we've got 3 puppies. I guess they're not puppies. 1's 11 years old, so 3 dogs. And then I am jiu-jitsu is my hobby, and then I'm also a baker, and those would be the big things about Becca that I would think are important. And then kind of how I got to where I am with launching my own business is I went to school I started school with is the health emphasis. And as I progressed, I was 1 class shy of graduating with my certification for family life education. And so that switched my bachelor's degree into a social sciences. And so my education background is a bachelor's with social science focus, a master's in family studies, and then I spent 6 years as a county extension agent, and I absolutely loved my job. I got to be creative. I got to meet the needs of the community. I got to develop programs that were specific to needs. But in all of that, I also got to learn that not everybody gets to learn the same things we do growing up. Like just healthy relationships. I think it is such a big important thing. And not everybody gets to learn what that looks like. They don't get to learn what healthy looks like. And that's a relationship with yourself, with others, with food, with nutrition, with your exercise. Like it's so much more than the romantic part that people automatically go to. And so I kind of learned how to do that from teaching middle schoolers all the way to teaching married couples and some that have been married for like 40 years. And so I learned that. And then I got married in 2022, and we decided that getting married was a great idea. But then 3 months later, it was a great idea to both change jobs, move states, sell a house, totally relocate our lives. And so that's when my business was born, because it was one of those things of like, before we really started a family, I wanted to have the hard grunt work of the foundation of my business laid. And so that's the journey that I've been on. And Stacked Intent was really developed to help people and individuals become the best, most authentic version of themselves, with the idea of, when you have a healthy relationship with yourself, every other aspect of your life improves.
Okay, so you touched on not everybody knows what healthy relationships look like. And when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, you're so right. But not even just in the sense that, like, not everyone has those like role models in their life, but also, even if you are shown healthy relationships, I feel like my family had a pretty, like, generally healthy relationship with each other, but they didn't teach us how to have healthy friendships and how to be healthy humans and how to love ourselves in a healthy way. So they were doing one thing, but not like you're left to figure things out for yourself when you're younger, and you're exposed to like all of these weird situations and feeling left out or feeling like just some type of way when you're growing up and a teenager. And if you don't have somebody that will literally like sit there and talk to you about how you're feeling and kind of like point out certain things and certain lessons for you, I feel like a lot of the time it's really easy to miss those lessons until you grow later in life and can look back on them.
Oh, yeah, I think that's so true. And then if we even take into account like our movies and our TV shows, if you look at how they portray most relationships, especially romantic ones, a lot of it's romanticized. There might be bad negative things happen, but it might get glazed over. And so it's that aspect of knowing that healthy is possible, and you can have a standard of what you want something to be and require it of the other people in your life. And if they're not going to respect it, then you put those boundaries up in those ways. So it is, you if you're not, it is, if you don't have those discussions with your parents growing up or with the adults in your life, you might miss some of it. And so it's just, I've really learned through the years that a lot of people will sometimes put into other relationships, but not themselves. Well, if you don't fill yourself up and you're not a whole person, you can't give to your kids, you can't give to your partner, you can't give in your job. And so it's really learning that a healthy relationship, it starts with self-care and that self-growth.
So, we're going to talk about 9 key traits for cultivating a positive self image. Do you want to just start by walking us through? Maybe just start with the first one and we'll work our way through and see where we end up. And then I'll jump in if I have like anything to say, because I truly don't know. I mean, I could maybe guess a couple, but I don't know where you're going with all 9. So, I'll let you lead the way.
Positive self traits that kind of help us. Um, I think it starts with your own inner dialogue is your first trait of, what do you talk to yourself? What is your inner dialogue of how self-talk works? Like, what does your inner dialogue look like? Because a lot of our research says that there's a large percentage, it's more than 80% of what we say to ourselves is negative. Well, if what you're talking to yourself is negative, if your self talk is negative, then it's not going to be helpful in the conversations that you're having, because you're going to be negative in the conversations that you're having. So I would think that positive self talk starts with what your inner dialogue is. So that first one is, what is your inner dialogue? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think that that's so important, and you don't even realize how much your inner dialogue impacts like your subconscious and the things that you actually notice and take out of life. But when you get into neurolinguistics programming, then you start to learn that your inner dialogue isn't just you being a bully to yourself. It like literally changes your outer world, but a part of your like brain
Mm-hmm.
literally will start pulling in things that make your beliefs true because it wants you to be right. So if you believe these bad things about yourself, then you're going to notice more and more things that confirm these bad things about yourself. And vice versa, if you're thinking positive things about yourself in your head, then you'll start to confirm that those positive things about yourself are true in the outside world.
Yeah. And so, and, and, and sometimes some of that comes from what other people have said to us. So if you can't be your own cheerleader, then it's going to come from somewhere else. So I'd say your first one is really look at what your inner dialogue looks like. How can you shift it and make it more of that positive? And then another one in a positive self image that I really think is important is practicing gratitude, being grateful for the places that we've been. Because if we can't be grateful, it can get really hard because we all have really, really hard things in our day to day. But if we can find the one or two or three positives to our day, then it really helps us in being able to go back to what that self image looks like. You can find the positive parts of yourself. And one way that I've always been able to do that is I have a journal it's just a blank journal, but just write numbers down every day and write beside that things I'm grateful for. And that helps you see it. It helps you be able to sometimes go back and see what's happening. Like in one of my journals, now that I'm seeing what last year was going on the same date because it's a 5-year journal. And so, like, I'm seeing what was happening last year at this time and to see the changes. That's another place that helps your positive self image is being able to see what you can be grateful for, being able to see where you've been and where you want to go, and finding the gratefulness in it can really help.
So, are there certain things that you find yourself writing down like fairly often when it comes to your gratitudes?
I would say that as I've gotten older, I found myself grateful for the parents that I have, just from being exposed to other people sometimes, or just other people in their relationships as adults to their parents. And I'm grateful for the parents that I have and the way that they want to spend time with us, but the way that they also interact and listen to what's going on. I'd say my husband's another one. And then I had to remember. So remember, I talked about all those transitions. Having that many transitions at one time is a struggle because I left a career I love, so totally changed my identity there. Went to being an entrepreneur where as I saw lots of people during my day, so I became very lonely in some senses. And so I had to remind myself sometimes that I was living dreams that I had dreamed about. Like I had married a guy that totally loved me and loved every part of me, even my brutally honest self. And so reminding myself that that's it. I got to live close to my parents, even though it wasn't totally in the plan for that little while. For about 2.5 years, I got to live right back up the road from my parents. So that's sometimes what I find grateful is sometimes reminding myself that even when things are really hard or challenging, that I'm living something that I wanted. Like I'm living some of those dreams that me 10 years ago really wanted to be in. And so that's one. Launching my business, even though it's been challenging and there's been parts and it's slower to grow than I wanted it to be, it's still something I'm excited about and grateful for because that's what a 7-year-old me was really excited about doing was having my own business. So I think that's it is really looking at what's happening in life and what can I be grateful for? Like,
Yeah.
why can I be grateful for those aspects?
Yeah, and you said that your business is slower or is or was slower to grow than you wanted it to be, but you're still grateful for it, which I think is something that's really important to touch on and to highlight is that even if you want to be at a different level, like you said before, look at where you were before and where you are now and see how far you've actually come and give yourself the credit that you deserve there. And just also know that like if you want to reach a certain level, you can and you will if you stick to it. So it's coming and even be grateful for like in the future when it does come. So I asked you if you have certain things that you write down like fairly regularly because every morning when I'm doing my gratitude list, I have my animals. So I have 2 dogs and a cat, and a lot of the time they're like so well behaved in the morning when I'm sitting out there journaling, and they'll just be like napping right next to me, and they look so cute and so sweet when they're napping, and they're not being like wild little monsters. And every morning I'm just looking at them like, I'm so in love with you guys. So they somehow make it on my list like every day, no matter what's going on.
Yeah, I can agree. My dogs sometimes make it on there. Depends on the kind of day we've had, but for the most part, it is. And I think that's just it. It's finding the things that can make you really enjoy what's happening in your everyday and making you love your everyday.
Yeah. Okay, so number 3.
I would say self-awareness. And I would say that because it kind of goes along with that inner dialogue and grateful, but self-awareness, it's being able to understand what your strengths look like, what your values look like, areas that you can grow in. It's also being able to look at what you're not so good at or what you might be failing in. Or one of those, I mean, if you talk about communication, did you communicate really badly in an area and you can come back and recognize that? And so it's taking that ability of self awareness, because really, if you don't have self awareness, you can be very unaware of what's happening around you, and very unaware of the effect that you're having on other people. And so that self awareness to me goes back to that healthy self relationship, because having a healthy self relationship doesn't mean you're just looking at all your pros and positives of yourself. It may mean that you're looking at something that's maybe not negative. It also might just be something that you don't like about yourself or something you want to shift or change and to be different. So self awareness really takes one of those dives of being important.
Okay, I think that these so far are so good and so like non-negotiable when you're talking about your self-image and kind of developing that in a healthy way. So, I love the track that you're on. Let's go with number 4.
I'd say self care. And self care, I think, is one of those that gets a really bad rap sometimes. But I think it's because I think it's the picture that's been painted for self care, of self care's being selfish and I have to go do this all by myself, for taking over when somebody else is trying to do something. But self care, it's nourishing what your physical and your mental well being is. And so that can be as simple as, I need the kitchen counters cleaned off and clean and not messy, or I need the laundry put away, or I reset the couch cushions and pillows before I go to bed. Those are self-care too. And so that's why I think self-care is important, because, and adding in things like your exercise. What does your exercise look like for you? And when is it important to do? And not allowing other things to run over that time. Or it can be things like meals. What do your meals need to look like? So just, it can be, self care can be small, or it can be that you need a whole day at a spa to reset yourself. And so you have both ways, and both are important, but it can be the simple, small, everyday that also helps in your day to day.
Yeah, I think that that's super important to touch on that. It could be small things, like small necessities, you almost call them, because I know if my house is a disaster, I don't feel good and I don't show up as my best self. I might be like a little stressed, or my husband might leave something else on the counter and I'm like, oh no, he did not. And then I'm not showing up as the best wife either, because I'm just like, ready to, I don't know, kick him out of the house for putting something else in a messy spot. So, yeah, I think that that is something that gets overlooked a lot. And then, so far we have inner dialogue, gratitude, self awareness, self care. And then what would you say number 5 is?
I would look at resilience, and resilience in the way of learning to bounce back from what a challenge or a setback might be, because we're going to have them. It's just unfortunately one of those parts of life that just happen. And it's not necessarily that you have to immediately come right back or figure it out, but I mean, one example I have is in the last, so I didn't date very much, really. I had a boyfriend my latter year, my senior year. I had a boyfriend for like a year through my college years. And then I was single until me and my husband met. So I was single for about 8.5 years between that. And since I was like 7 or 8, have journaled and done my devotions and read before I went to bed. So, like, sometimes I'd tell my parents good night and I'd go to my room for like 2 or 3 hours and read and do my journaling. Well, when I got married, that got affected. That really got affected because that was the time me and my husband could sit and talk or sit and have some time together. And so it's like, oh, I don't just have this silent moment that I get to do my journaling and my reading and my devotional. And so it took me a year and a half to figure out where to put that in my day because for 20 plus years, it had happened at the same time every night. And so I now do it more after he gets up for work and he leaves. I get up with him and help him get out the door, but then I have the time to do it. But that resilience of it was a setback because it was like, this is really important to how I function in my everyday, but it doesn't work at the same time that it has for 20 plus years. So, and he helped me figure it out. He realized it was important, but it's that resilience or it's the challenges of you have an unexpected challenge at work or you have an unexpected challenge that happens at home. It's just being able to come back from it. It's being able to process how hard it might be, but then being able to come back and reset yourself so that it doesn't just take you out, but you're able to bounce back from it in some kind of way.
Yeah, so instead of being like, well, I guess I can't journal now, or well, I guess I can't talk to my husband, then you're choosing to find a solution to it and like fix it because it's not like it's not fixable or like there's no way to have all of the above. So that's amazing.
And he knew how important it was too. Like he could tell that I needed it. It was just a matter of figuring out where it needed to go in the day.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, so then number 6.
I'd say your social support. And that's because building relationships with people that are going to uplift and encourage you, it's important, but it's also as important as asking or not just having those people, but also having those people that are going to be honest with you too. Like, not just give you the encouragement and the fluff, but maybe really check on you in some kind of way. And so, your social support system, it doesn't necessarily have to be that big. Like, it can be a small social support, but it's being able to have those people that are going to help you and who are going to give it to you and the people that you can return that with of you can return that support because it's said that the 5 people that we surround ourselves with, that's kind of what makes up who we are. And so you really should be selective of the 5 people that you're going to be around the most because that's going to affect you. So if you're around somebody that is a total Debbie Downer, totally negative all the time, that's going to affect how you see your self-image versus if you're around somebody that looks for those positives in their day and looks for what they can be grateful for or how they can take care of themselves because they'll reflect and encourage that on you too and how that's important for you as well.
Okay, so what would you say if one of my listeners is realizing that they maybe have somebody who's not the best influence in their life, or like, let's say they kind of get caught up in this negative loop of like talking to or hanging out with this person and they start gossiping, but they don't like to gossip and it just seems inevitable every time they get together and they can recognize it's not a good thing, it's not doing anybody any good in the long run, but they don't know how to get out of this. Like, what would your recommendation be for that situation?
You have to really evaluate what it is And it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean you'll find the solutions right away. But I, in the last year, was told by a pastor that I was sitting down talking to that sometimes we have to prune things and we have to sit there. And if you think about harvest and how trees function. So if we look at trees don't keep the same leaves all year long. Like they in the fall the leaves fall off and then in the spring they have buds that bloom new blooms. And that's the same thing with fruit. If a tree's not pruned right, it's not going to produce good fruit. And so we really can look at that in our social support system as well of like if we have somebody that's really not benefiting us and is really hurting us in some ways, then we may have to move them or we may have to prune them into a different place in our life. And it doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it easy by any means either. But it may be that they're not that same support that they might have been 5 years ago. And so we need them to be in a different place in our life so that we can keep growing and we can keep being happy in our lives. But we might have to prune them out of the person that we called in the middle of the night and they're not that person anymore because situations changed, the relationship changed in some way. And so that doesn't mean that it's easy. None of it's easy. But that's where you have to go back to that self-talk and that inner dialogue of if you're not able to be true to yourself and this person makes it really hard for you to be true to yourself, then you may have to move where you allow them in your life. And I think that's where people pleasing comes in sometimes of like you might have to set a boundary that's uncomfortable. But as long as you love your boundaries and as long as you agree with your boundaries, it's okay if not everybody else does. And it's okay if you don't have to necessarily, they may talk to you about things that you're not comfortable talking to them about. And that may have changed. You may have at one time been very comfortable and very open, but if there's been hurt or you get hurt every time you open up, then you got to evaluate what do you need out of that. And that's where you have to reflect back in of what do I need out of this situation? And then you have to decide how to handle it. Do you address it with that person or do you just let it take its natural course? And sometimes all you got to do is sit back and let it take its natural course. And it will. If somebody's not is invested anymore in a social situation, it'll slowly fade away, which means that it might be closing a door to allow another door to open.
Yeah, I am a firm believer in if somebody's meant to be in your life and they're possibly a good person to keep in your life, then they'll be okay with your boundaries. They'll support you and they might even be feeling the same way. Like they might have started to realize that it feels icky to gossip, but that's just what you guys knew for so long. So it's habit. And they might even be relieved to hear that you're also moving past that. So if they don't react well to it, then that might just be a sign that you guys have kind of outgrown each other and outgrown your friendship.
It's okay to let people shift in your life. And you may be able to sit down and have that conversation with them of, hey, I really don't like how we're talking and gossiping about this. I'd really like to talk about things that help us both grow. They may totally be fine with that. And that might be a turning point in your relationship. But that's where you have to decide what is this relationship to me? Where do I want it to be? Do I want it to stay in my life? Or has it maybe lived its life? Because we have multiple kinds of friends. We've got friends that are here for life, but then there are just friends and people that are a part of our journey. And so sometimes that person might have just already served the purpose of their journey in your life. And so it's okay for them to shift in your network. It's okay for it to shift and be different. But sometimes we just have to turn around and be honest with ourselves about what that actually looks like. And I think that's the hardest part about it.
Yeah, definitely, especially if it's somebody that you think is supposed to be in your life for forever and then time progresses and you realize that maybe it's not that kind of a friendship. That definitely can be tough. So then we are on to number 7.
I would say sleep. And I
Ooh.
would say sleep because that's a part of our positive image. Like if we don't take care of ourselves and our rest and we overpour and overdo, you're not going to be good. Like, you're not going to be okay. And so I have Crohn's. And one of the best things I've found for my Crohn's, when I start to have a flare or I start to not feel good, it's just going to sleep. And so I have to allow my body the time to be able to take the rest, but that means that I have to allow it in my schedule. So, like, before me and my husband got together, there'd be days that I'd go to bed and sleep like 18 hours. Like, I might get up in the somewhere in that because my dogs needed to go out, but for the most part, the two dogs that I had before we got together, they'll lay there and sleep with me when I don't feel good. Like, they can tell the difference. And as I got married, I had to figure out how to tell my husband, hey, I love spending time with you, but I really want to go lay down in the bed by myself and take a nap. And I had to figure out how to communicate that and how to communicate that this is the sleep I need and this is what's important. And so not everybody needs the same amount of sleep. And so it's figuring out what your optimal sleep is and what you need to sleep, but also what you need to wake up. Because my husband has 100 decimal alarm clock. Well,
Oh
we
gosh.
discovered that if that is what I wake up to, I wake up a very unkind person because it is so loud, so abrupt. I'm in a dead sleep and it's like a fire alarm going off over and over again. And so I had to get a different alarm clock. And so mine's like, the ones that like mimic a sunrise and slowly come on with the light and change. That's what my alarm clock is. And I wake up to the light starting to shift and change. Doesn't even go off, like the noises don't. And we found that made our mornings go so much better. And mine goes off 5 minutes before his does. So, like, it's not even that it's that much of a difference of time, but that abruptness was not good for me waking up on the correct side of the bed of being kind and happy. And so it's figuring that out. And that goes back to the self care of understanding what you need.
My husband has been trying out new alarm sounds too, and he had, oh my gosh, it would terrify me every time it went off in the morning because he wakes up really early. And I kind of wake up a lot of days not like late, but a little bit later than him, just depending on the day. Sometimes I'll intentionally try to wake up earlier to get my day started, but sometimes I'll know that I need sleep and I'll just let myself wake up whenever I wake up naturally. But yeah, that is not a good way for me either to get started with that like terrifying alarm. And I do remember when I was in high school, those like metal alarm clocks that like ping off of the little bells, and they're also really scary. They're
Uh
very
huh.
loud, very abrupt. I used to have one of those because I felt like I couldn't wake up, but I couldn't wake up because I wasn't going to bed until like all hours of the night. And then I was waking up for school in the morning. So I just simply wasn't getting enough sleep. I also have a sunrise alarm clock and I love it. And I don't even have the sound turned on that because like you said, the light tends to wake you up, but I have an app on my phone. And if anybody's looking for a really peaceful way to wake up, it's called Sleep Cycle Alarm. And it is an app that, like, you'll set, let's say you want to wake up at 7 a.m. So you can set your desired wake up range, and it recommends a half an hour. So mine's set to a half an hour. So it will slowly start giving you like this really calming alarm sound. It's not an alarm, it's like whatever peaceful sound you want it to be. And it'll slowly come on and then it'll go back away. And then as it gets closer to 7, it will keep it on so that you wake up by 7 if you haven't yet. And that is so that if you are in REM sleep, it can slowly get you out of REM sleep instead of waking you up in the middle of REM sleep. And I'm not sponsored by them, but like everybody out there, if you want a nice way to wake up, try the sleep cycle alarm and it will change your life.
I think, and that's what makes the big difference of like, it's figuring out when you need to go to bed and making it non-negotiable of like, this is when I have to go to bed to be productive in my day and get up. And that's my husband gets up really a good 2 or 3 hours before I ideally want to. But I started just getting up with him because it just helped my day. Because otherwise, I was falling back asleep and sleeping because we're in a room that has no windows. And so you can sleep till noon and not have a clue. And so that was what was happening. I was going back to sleep and sleeping really hard. And so there are days that I allow that to happen, but it I had to find a better way to wake up, so I didn't wake up so angry. So that the sleep cycle sounds the alarm sounds very similar to how the alarm clock I bought is. It's because it's like it starts out like the sun is coming up, and so it starts in that very very like red color, and then turns into, I really don't know what the brightness turns into because I've gotten up with the red every day this week. And so it makes a big difference. Even my dogs have figured it out this morning. So we have 3 dogs, and this morning the littlest one was like, "Hello, your alarm's going off. I need to go out."
Oh, one of mine does that too. It's like as soon as she catches wind that I'm awake in any form, she'll like sit in her crate and start whining. And I'm like, you need to stop that. You're over a year old now and we're done with that. But she hasn't figured it out yet. So fingers crossed it comes, but well, it's okay.
It does. At least they wait till the alarm clock goes off.
Yeah, yeah, but once the alarm clock's off, once Stormy is up, she shows no mercy. So if Stormy's up, you're gonna get up sooner or later.
Yeah, yeah, that happens. That happens. But
Yeah,
it helps.
yeah. All right, so number 8.
I'd say financial. And financial in the way of not letting finances be such a negative thing for you. Because finances are one of those things that you have a relationship with. We have to have money. We have to pay mortgage or rent. There are certain things we have to be able to live. And so it's being able to make financial decisions, being able to feel confident in your decisions about your finances, but it's also being able to create like a financial plan to go with what your needs are, and then being able to address your wants. And that's what I love about a budget. And I'm a person that loves to budget all the way down to the penny. Here's what the paycheck's going to be, all the way down to as zero balance as I can get it. But what I had to learn how to explain to my husband is it's not that there's not money there, it's that we've given the money a job. And we've given it, like, this might be our groceries and our going out. This might be our travel. Like, travel's a big one that I make sure that goes in there because I want to be able to travel. Well, traveling is not necessarily cheap. And you might have a trip that you want to do, and then you already have the money. And so financial self-care and building a self relationship with finances is one of the things that I think is so important. And it's making budget and finances not be so negative. And that's one of those things that we learn by the age of about 7. So the relationship that you have with finances, you may have learned before you even really realized what was going on. So it depended on how money might have been talked about in your house, how you might have learned about it. I mean, there are things that some people don't get the opportunity to learn about until they're in high school or out of high school, or have made the mistake of maxing out credit cards, or however that might go. And so in your positive self-image, it's really having a positive, healthy relationship with what finances look like.
Yeah, and a really good way to look at, like, if somebody's out there and they're like, "You know what? I ignore my finances and I beat myself up a lot because I'm not in the greatest financial state." A good way to look at the financial state you're in is that you are now giving yourself an opportunity to show yourself how you can get out of this and into a healthier financial state. So everything's kind of a learning opportunity in life, even if it's not the learning opportunity you wanted. And you are able to turn that from like you being a victim of your debt into you owning it and figuring out how to get out of it and coming through on the other side.
Yeah. And I just think it's so important. I mean, I was fortunate enough to have parents that really taught me and educated me. And I like the numbers and like to know what they look like. And so it's just, and when you join a partnership, that has to be a conversation. That can't be avoided because especially if you've blended money, you can't just decide to avoid the money or avoid the topic, because that's how you end up in some financial struggles and problems. And so I think it is so important to really look at why you might have the relationship with finances that you do. And a lot of times we can look at what our family history was and how we grew up and see it, and how do you want it to look in 10 years, and then start working towards what you want it to look like in 10 years.
Yeah. Okay, so then we are on our final topic, number 9.
I would say avoid comparison. And so that
Ooh.
kind of like wraps all of those up, but avoid comparison. You don't want to compare yourself to what somebody else is doing or how their success is, because if you've ever like seen the pictures of like the icebergs where you only see the top of it and not everything that's happened before, that's really what it is. So when we compare, and I think this is where social media really does us a disservice, is you're sometimes comparing to somebody's 5 seconds of highlights when the 30 minutes 45 minutes surrounding it might not have been so great. And so avoid the comparison, because nobody's been on the same journey you've been on. Nobody's been on the same path you have. Nobody's had the same adversities that you've got. And so really, really learn not to compare yourself so that you can really dig into what your own uniqueness is.
Yeah, that's so important. So, the 9 traits of a healthy self relationship obviously can apply to anybody, not just entrepreneurs. But when we're talking entrepreneurs, how would you say that having that healthy self relationship can make their experience running a business that much better?
You are able to 100% identify when you need something. And because depending on where you live, depending on what your life is, being an entrepreneur could be one of the things that you start to feel isolated, you start to feel alone, you start to feel lonely. And so when you can really identify what you need in those areas, you can make sure that you're building your schedule and your life around that. Of, okay, I need to go exercise. Well, how do you want to exercise? Do you want to do it in a group? Will that help you? Give you some socialization too? Okay, well, then make sure you design your schedule around that. Like, I have a class that I like to go to for jujitsu that's at 11 o'clock. So I try really hard to schedule my days around that so that I get to go to that 11 o'clock class. And so that's what I would say is like you building a healthy relationship with yourself and really discovering what you need will really help you be able to communicate to those around you. And you'll be able to identify where you might work best. I mean, sometimes for me, when I really feel like I'm tired of just sitting in a quiet house, going and sitting at a coffee shop, I can do way more in 2 hours than I sat there and did in 8, because you're around just movement and other people going around. And even though I'm not engaging with anybody, it just helps give me that I'm not just sitting in dead silence with myself. Now, on the flip side of that, I do think it's really important to spend some silent time with yourself. Like, I do think it's important. And so, as an entrepreneur and being by yourself in that healthy self relationship, it's being able to be alone with yourself too. It's being able to know what you need, be able to vocalize it, but it's also being able to sit in that silence with yourself.
So I don't remember what it is human design related, but have you heard of human design, first of all?
I think so.
Okay, so it's like a system or a tool that helps you figure out how to like work with your body's energy. And my friend does human design readings, and she told me once, I don't remember what it is, but I think it's like a center of mine that isn't defined. And she said if I ever am sitting, because I have a home office, if I'm ever sitting at home and just struggling to get in the zone working, something that will really help me with not having that certain center defined is if I go sit in a coffee shop, because there are other people around me and I can kind of borrow some of their energy to get that thing done. So when you were talking about that, it reminded me of that. And I was just like, I wonder if if you have the same thing going on that I do. But it's so true. And then also, if you're going to a coffee shop to get work done, you like know you've drug yourself out of the house, maybe packed up your laptop, and you're like, I'm here with a mission, and I'm not just going to like sit at the coffee shop doing nothing, because that's not why I came here. So you do just bust out so much more work with that like change of scenery and going there with an intention where you can't get distracted as easily too by like animals and maybe a TV show's on or something like that.
Or the laundry you got to put away, the dishes you have to do, the like if you have to, depending on where you have to are in your house, it may be all those home things. And so I think that's the other thing as an entrepreneur, we have to remind ourselves that we're trying to do a job. We're still trying to work, and so even sometimes our household things have to be put on pause and wait.
Yeah.
And so a coffee shop can help with that because you can only do what you take with you.
Yeah. Okay, so I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, especially when they're first getting started, can get stuck in the hustle mode and they don't necessarily have that control over their schedule that you talked about earlier because they're just like operating from a place of burnout where they're taking on all of the work that they can and probably not even charging enough for that work. So they might feel like they like vanished into their business and don't really have that sense of self-worth or even self-identity. What would you say is one actionable tip that these people can do maybe starting today to get back on track and to start to figure out who they are and how they can start to love themselves again?
It would be, what are your big rocks? So, like, if you've ever seen the demonstration of like you take a jar and you have rocks that are larger, rocks that are a little smaller, pebbles, and then sand. Well, if you put all the sand in your jar first, all your big rocks aren't going to fit. So, figure out what your big rocks are. Figure out what those are in your life, put them in, and then figure out what the next size is, put them in, and then allow the small pebbles and sand to take in. Because if you do it in that order, then you're going to be able to find what helps you in your day to day and what helps you not feel stuck in this hustle and bustle and not get in a trap, but maybe focus on what you want to focus on. Because there are so many people doing so many things in so many different ways. What's your take on it? How do you want it to look? And don't allow yourself to be distracted. And so that's where the sand might take over and not your big priorities. And because, so like for me, it's spending time with my family. So, like my sister, my parents, my brother, spending time with my husband, my jujitsu, which is my exercise, and then my eating and the way that I eat. And so those are some of my big rocks. And then my journaling and Bible study and devotional time and reading, because those are the things that really help my everyday. And so figure out what you need to help your everyday and then move from there. And it's okay for it to shift in seasons.
Yeah. So, coming from a photography background, that's really easy to picture because it's like if you're taking all of these sessions, then you have all of this editing work, and then you can get yourself to a place where you're just loaded down and you're having to work such long hours that you're like, sorry, husband, I can't hang out tonight, or I'll be in bed later. I'm not going to go to bed with you right now. And that's not if you're valuing your family above your busy work, then that's definitely not a place that you want to get yourself in long term. So I really like that analogy. Okay, and then you have resources that you've created through Stacked Intent, and you had one that you wanted to share with listeners today. Can you just tell everybody a little bit about that?
It is ways to not let yourself vanish through cracking life's codes of building a strong self relationship. And so, where that came from was I was working on developing my first course, and I had the question of, how do you not let yourself vanish? Like, I know how I don't, like, how I maintain myself in friendships and relationships, but how do other people do it? And so I asked like a handful of people, and everybody gave me a response. And so then I was like, I wonder how many poor people would answer me. I ended up with more than 200 responses to my question. And so I built this guide and I built this course. And so it is it's a guide that gives 6 different keys. So like 6 different areas. So what I did was I took the answers that everybody gave me and then I categorized them. So like I categorized them into giving, and so that it wasn't just a bunch of little different thoughts, giving them lump sum categories. And so I did that and I ended up with 6 different ones. And so it's the first is you create open self communication. The second is you focus on what makes you unique. The third is creating your financial independence. The fourth is maintaining your healthy boundaries. The fifth one is loving my own company. And the last one is respect. And so within each of those, it gives you kind of a general concept of why that aspect is important. And then it gives you 4 to 5 questions to prompt yourself and ask yourself, why do I need to create self communication? Why should I focus on what makes me unique? So that's what that resource is. And it has a course that goes along with it that's a free course that just kind of walks you through in more detail each of those aspects and each of those steps.
Okay, a free course is so fun. And then do you have the link available?
Really, if you just go to stackedintent.com/resources, that takes you to my resource page. And so it's the first one there. And
Okay,
then
awesome.
I think the courses is very similar to. Yes. So the course it's stackedintent.com/stacked intent courses. And so it's that first course on there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. That sounds like a really cool freebie and a really cool resource for listeners to get in on. And I love that you're doing the course with it. So then if I asked you what's one piece of advice that you want to share with listeners today, what would your final words of wisdom be?
When you talk about self-care and self-image and that healthy self-relationship, one thing I believe is really important to remember is that finding that healthy self-relationship does not mean that you're going to go through total comfort. You might have to live through something that's uncomfortable to really get to that place of having a really good, healthy relationship with yourself. And so just find really good support, whether it's a friend, a family member, a coach, just somebody, a therapist, somebody that can give you the support to really find that self love and self relationship that's healthy for you.
Okay, I love that. You're so wise. I feel like I thought that I might catch you off guard with that one a little bit and you'd be like, "Ooh, let me think about it." But you just had it ready. So that's amazing. Okay, so then if somebody's listening and they really like you and they want to follow along with you online or they want to work with you or just say hey to you, where can they find you?
So you can find me on most social media, so Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest. You can find me at Stacked Intent. And then if you want to get that course or even join my weekly newsletter that gets sent out that has tips and tools in it, you just go to stackedintent.com and it's on that homepage.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the call today and for just showing up and being open and honest and sharing all of your knowledge with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for tuning in to Rebel CEO. If today's episode lit a fire under you, I would love if you would hit subscribe, leave a rating, and drop a review. That little action helps more purpose driven women like you find this show. And make sure that you're not keeping all of this magic to yourself. Share this episode with a friend who's ready to ditch the rules and build a life that actually feels good. If you're looking for a little one-on-one connection, slide into my DMs on Instagram at rebel.ceo.podcast, and I would love to hear what you're thinking and what you're building so that I can cheer you on every step of the way. And one more thing, if you're ready for even more support, join my free Facebook community. It is packed with like-minded women who are rebelling, setting wild goals, dreaming big, and making moves. The link's waiting for you in the show notes, and I will see you inside. Until next time, keep breaking the rules, chasing your purpose, and creating the life that you were meant for. I'll see you in the next episode.